Hey everybody, welcome. In today's video, I want to emphasize the fact that if you're a tournament angler, you need to focus on practicing in a way that the predicted weather conditions are going to be come day of the tournament. So in other words, what I want you to do and what I try to do is the first thing before I start practice of a tournament, the first thing I do is I look at the weather the day of the tournament, and then I also look at the weather leading into the tournament. Because if you fish the weekend, if you practice the weekend before, and then your tournament's the following weekend, so much can happen with water conditions between that time. If you're on a reservoir, you could have a huge rain and bring the water way up, or if you're anywhere, you could get a big cold front come through, north winds come in, and the wind can mess everything up where you were practicing. Water temperatures can drop. Um, you could have cloud cover, you could not have cloud cover. That's all going to affect what the fish are going to do and what's going to be successful. And this is a hard lesson to learn. I mean, I still, as long as I've been fishing, I make it a point to check out the weather the day of the tournament and leading into the tournament. But, sometimes I'll get on a pattern in practice, and I know that change is coming in weather. I know the vulnerability of a certain pattern I may have discovered, and it can be hard to get off of it. And I'm not saying you should just throw it away, but I am saying you need to anticipate what the fish will be doing the day of the tournament. So if you got a huge, for example, let's say on Lake Okeechobee in January, February, where I've spent a lot of time. I've fished a lot of tournaments there over the years at that period of time. And actually, I'm no one to be giving advice on that lake, but I do know there's a few basic rules I know. And that one of them is don't fish freshly muddy water in that lake. And by that, I mean, just to give an example, what can happen there is you could get a bad wind out of the north, and if you happen to do all your pre-fishing on the south end, well, the lake's going to get that north wind's going to stir up the lake, and all that muddy water's going to push into any sort of clear water that you had on that south end, and that's disastrous because those fish shut down in muddy water like nothing else I've ever seen any other place. So that's just an example. So to translate to what you're practicing or how you're practicing is if you got a tournament, the following weekend, and you're out there practicing the weekend before, and you see like on that tournament day a huge north wind, well, you better make sure you're fishing water that's not going to be susceptible to that north wind and the muddy water that north wind will bring in. So oftentimes you might be on the north end of that lake, for example, or you might be in a canal, one of these side canals or something to get out of that. Just you need to know to avoid that. And the other thing with that lake is at that time of year, one of the big patterns after a cold front is fishing mats. Punching mats with a heavy Texas rig, with a creature bait rigged. So you know where those mats are. You don't need to know if you got a big cold front coming through on Lake Okeechobee. Sometime between when you practice and the day of the tournament, you don't really need to know where they're spawning so much, or where you don't really need to know where the big bedding fish are. That's actually, it's kind of a yes and no. Let's put it this way: what you do need to know is where the best mats are that are going to be out of the wind and out of the vulnerability of muddy water. And those mats oftentimes are going to be adjacent to good spawning areas. So yes, you do want to know where the good spawning areas are, but you may not necessarily be fishing for those bedding fish, you'll be fishing the mats that these bedding fish might go to. So, anyways, that's just an example. Another example would be, let's say, in Minnesota, for example, you might be on a lake where there's a good bedding pattern going on, but during that week where you're at your full-time job and you come back for the tournament the following weekend, all those bedding fish, at least the females, might be all gone because, again, a cold front comes through. That cold front comes through. The males, a lot of the males will, especially once the eggs are laid, the males will, they'll tough it out through a cold front and stay on that bed. But how many tournaments are you going to win fishing smaller males off of beds? Not many at all. You need to, especially here in Minnesota, with the good populations of bass we got, I mean, you're going to have to win with females. And now I'm talking largemouth. Sometimes those spawning smallmouths could be pretty big and help out a winning bag. But anyways, back on the largemouths, you got to know where those big females go. They're not going to be sitting on a bed after a big cold front. They're going to be getting to where they can, a lot of times it might be their post-spawn areas, especially if it's the latter end of the spawn. You know, they're not going to linger around the spawning grounds. They're just going to go to wherever they hang out post-spawn, which, you know, might be some heavy cover out more in the main, you know, out of the spawning areas. You know, spawning areas in Minnesota typically are just, in a lot of places, just protected bays and canals and that. So they'll pull out of there, find somewhere more on the open part of the lake, and you know, some fresh, heavy, probably the heaviest weed growth they can find, that casts some good shade, is where they'll go to after they're done spawning. So that's where you, and to wrap that up, so that's where you want to look for the weekend before. Sure, you got all these fish bedding, but you want to know where that good weed growth is. You want to know, you know, where are the weeds coming up really good, where these fish will go to for post spawn. You don't want to know where a 5-pounder is on a bed the week before, because knowing there's going to be a big cold front coming through on a Wednesday or Thursday or Friday, you want to know where those best post spawn places are. And in Minnesota, a lot of times it's where them heaviest weed, the earliest, heaviest weed growth out more in the main parts of the lake. That's a lot of times where they end up. So that's what you need to be looking for. And if you don't have that, sometimes it might be the docks in the area. So know which docks are good in the area and which ones aren't. So anyhow, in this, in knowing the weather, knowing the conditions, you have to, you know, maybe consult a couple different weather forecasts and just know what your lake does under these different conditions. So if you're fishing on a cloudy day and drilling them on top waters, well, realize that if the day of the tournament it's sunny out, that, hey, you can maybe try that top water pattern, but understand that without the cloud cover, maybe those fish aren't going to hit that top water nearly as well, and you might have to do something else. So, and a lot of that comes with confidence, and really that's experience, and confidence will allow you to make better judgments on how to practice for the tournament day rather than practicing for the practice day. And that's what it kind of comes down to. Because on a practice day, you might get on a pattern, but knowing how the lake's going to change and how the fish will change with those changes as the weather causes all this change, you know, just having the experience and having the confidence based on that experience, that helps a lot. But that'll come with time. But just keep it in mind. Always, and I'm going to wrap this up here, because what else there is to say? It's a pretty simple concept. Just remember, practice for the tournament day and the conditions predicted, check your weather charts, check your weather predictions. I know they're sometimes not accurate, but you got to go with you got to go with the best information available. So check your weather forecasts and use your practice time to anticipate what the fish will be doing under those conditions that are forecast on the day of the tournament. Pretty simple. Sometimes it's hard to put that into actual practice, and by practice I mean to actually do it that way. So anyways, that's it on that topic. Over.